Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm recording this on Sunday, but this is for Monday. Just want to say, actually, I was actually quite pleased with the overall work of the assignments, the profile assignments. I was actually a little surprised because, I mean, this is kind of a difficult class to really kind of like get going in and get your feet on the ground, move so quickly. And we already have stuff that, I mean, last week I had like one thing posted, now I have four. So, you know, thank you for that. Thank you for really like concentrating and like watching the videos and that sort of thing. I mean, keep up with the reading. It's showing, okay? So, anyway, I worked on the profile assignments over the weekend. You all should have gotten them back. I did not get profile assignments from three people. I just wanted to say that, okay? So, you know, I'm because the assignment was due at the end of Friday. I also do give a 24-hour I call grace period. It's more of a penalty period, to be honest with you, because you even though you're getting a grace, you're at the same time you're if it comes in within that 24-hour period, it's a grade lower. Unfortunately, none of the three people actually submitted an assignment within that 24-hour period. So then as you follow the syllabus and earlier lectures and that sort of thing, and also the rubric, it becomes an F. So I'd really like to know why they weren't submitted. I realize that like this is difficult being asynchronous and maybe keeping track of things, that sort of thing. You just have to really keep track of things and being a self-starter. And that's kind of what this is all about. In fact, my new assignment is all about being a self-starter, and I would say the new assignment actually is linked to the whole idea of like coming up with leads and and for a story and starting with with the right angle. So basically, it's all about being organized and making sure that you're staying focused. So that's what you have to do in this class. So I mean, if any kind of issues, I've had people like talk to me that they've had issues already, and they've had to. I mean, we've made arrangements and work things out. So I'm not the big bad wolf here. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Okay. Um, so I'll be sitting inside with a note basically, and I'll be talking about stuff too that I saw in the stories that I just want to make sure that we like tackle and certain issues I want to nip in the bud like ahead of time. But just remember that this is a craft that you're different. That's different from what you've been dealing with before. Okay, this is not essay writing, that sort of thing. There's a different style of what I call footnoting, and it's called attribution. I'll be talking a little bit about that today. And I mean, it's not something that's the easiest thing to teach, but I usually teach it more actually like by learning by doing. When I write about it and I point to it in the stories that I edit. Okay. Um, all right, so let's go to the split screen here. Okay. And here's a new thing I posted. So if actually you look at all the assignments right here, and again, this is actually the student view. Look at this. We already got like four things posted. This is crazy. How about that? All right. So as the next step, as we climb the ladder of the progression of your news writing, is not just to actually like write the story, but actually come up with the idea for the story. If there's anything that like your boss, your editor wants you to do more than anything, is that is to essentially be a self-starter, is something I probably said before. Um, and and I might have said this already too, but I know auto reporters work remotely and that sort of thing, but back in the days when they all worked in newsrooms, it was the best thing an editor could say about his newsroom is if it was empty. And the reason for that is because they knew the reporters were out looking for work, looking for assignments, looking for doing research for their stories, that sort of thing. So as part of the whole exercise of learning how to actually like develop a story, um, learning how to focus a story, learning how to develop a unique angle of the story, it's important for you to learn how to come up with an idea for a story. Okay. Um, it could be something that you're passionate about. I mean, I know reporters are supposed to be objective. They're supposed to be, but and you are being objective, but it doesn't also mean that you can't write about something you might be passionate about. Okay. Um, Often reporters are given essentially like what they call beats. You might have heard that term before. And that's where they actually are given like maybe a certain jurisdiction or regional area or town or something like that. And they have to cover what's going on in that area. Okay. Or they're given like a specific subject, like I used to do, which is transportation. I used to do that for the Bergen Record. and I had to write about things that were going on in Jersey Turnpike and development there and that sort of thing. But one thing that an editor or boss doesn't want to do is to have to hold your hand and usher you through the job. They already have plenty of stuff to do, okay? So they want you to come up with your own ideas. And also, it's not just that, I have to say, and this is just going to sound a little cynical, but there have been a number of editors been laid off, okay? So now our reporters are actually kind of winging it and actually flying solo and like doing it on their own. And I like to say, and I say this in digital news writing a lot, that there's five tool players. That's what journalism is. It's a term I've co-opted from baseball. And that is essentially, again, and I've said this, and that is you have to learn how to write and report. That's number one. But you also have to learn how to edit, and basically a lot of times you don't have an editor actually nowadays. They've cut that staff. So you have to like not only just like review your own copy, but actually come up with your own ideas. So it's not only just a matter of like impressing your editor, it's almost like a necessity. Okay. We'd often do that at Patch because I was a New Jersey editor, and I mean, I had too big of a staff to like really like kind of like, keep tabs on every little single thing they were doing. Okay. Um, so yeah, come up with your own idea. Come up with a lead for a story. Come up with an idea for a story. That's what this is about. Okay. This is also a class participation exercise. So again, if you question whether like why is there a class participation grade in an online asynchronous class, well, it's because you do have to do work and do things on your own and show your own initiative. And this is one opportunity right here. Okay. All right. So this is something that I actually plan to. I'll get all your ideas in, and I'm going to get up early on Friday, and I'm going to actually look at it and say, okay, so what's the best idea here? Okay. And that idea is going to be your third assignment. So if you're wondering what the assignments were, the profile assignment was the first one. That's the one I graded over the weekend and I got back. Okay. And that there'll be a rewrite on that again. That's due for June 6th. The second assignment was the leads worksheets that I assigned on Friday, and that'll be again due on this Friday, June 6th. And then June 5th will be come up with an idea for this. I'm going to ask you to come up with five ideas. And then the following week, basically what I'm going to do is that on Friday morning, I'm going to determine what is the best idea. And then that idea will be your third assignment, which will be due the following week, actually June 13th. Okay. This is actually an extra credit opportunity. Whoever comes up with the best idea gets a gets extra credit, a grade higher on their next assignment, which will be this one. Okay. Um, so anyway, so as it says here, being a journalist means being a self-starter. That means being independent and coming up with their own ideas. It also help you understand the importance of finding a unique angle in a story. Okay. So please, what I want you to do is come up with five ideas. It doesn't have to be like long essays or anything like that. I'm asking you to come up with like, it could be like a sentence long or something like that. I mean, even a few words, that's fine. Okay, nothing fancy. Just, I mean, you might try to want to persuade me a bit. That's fine, but I don't usually need that, but it's fine. But please show initiative. That's great. Please come up with five story ideas that are Rutgers related. So that is the one caveat here. They are Rutgers related, and I realize a lot of you aren't on campus, if not all of you are not on campus right now. I'm assuming that you go to Rutgers, as a student, you're in contact with Rutgers, Canvas, whatever, tuition, that sort of thing. So you have like maybe like certain ideas that you think should be explored and tackled and that sort of thing. So I'm asking you guys to actually not just come up with your own ideas. I'm also asking you guys to think of yourselves as like readers too. To think about, look, what are the kinds of things that I want to read about? Okay. Okay, that involve this campus because a lot of stuff, especially now that the Targum isn't the same as it used to be, a lot of stuff just isn't getting reported that goes on at this campus, I mean, a couple years ago we had, I'm not trying to give ideas away, but a couple years ago we had a big strike over tuition, and then right after that, and then they raised salaries for a lot of people, and then right after that they raised tuition like the highest ever. It's like the highest increase ever, or pretty close to it. So, what happened there? All right, so this is something I want you to do submit by Thursday night. And then on June 6th, I will in that my next video, I will actually tell you what that idea is, and then that'll be posted, okay? So that best idea will be your next graded assignment. Now, so one thing about this, I say the person who get extra, that one person will get extra credit, the person who gets the best idea. I have to admit that actually, like, that's probably a bit of a misnomer. Actually, there's a lot of times, actually, maybe even most of the time, I've had more than one person come up with the idea that works for me. Okay. So I give the extra credit to those people. I've given it to many as five, six people at one time. If there's overlap, I'm going to give you credit. Okay. So there you go. Now, a hint about this, and I mean, I do tell you like what the parameters are for the assignment. I feel like you need to do a story that actually don't think of it. It says here like no major investigations. Keep the idea simple. Okay. Best stories are probably like reaction stories. Okay. Because it's not like there's like this regular like flow, especially during the summertime of breaking news happening at Rutgers University. Okay. I know there's like crime and stuff like that, but there's probably certain ideas that probably need to be explored. And usually, like the best way to explore those ideas is to go to the people who are experiencing the firsthand. That's the students. Okay. So what I want you to do is to actually think of yourselves as students and think of other students you may know and what they think might be like some issues that they can react to that are going on campus. Those are like we call them reaction stories. So there's stories that basically are things that are going on campus that people can react to. Now you can also maybe take that even higher. Maybe there's like stuff that's going on that might be affecting Rutgers or something like that. Hint, hint, and stuff like there's a lot going on involving colleges that you basically like can write about. Okay, but again, the best source would be students. Okay. No major investigations. Like I'm gonna go undercover at the cafeteria or something like that, or stuff like that. Something you can do in a week. Okay. Think of something that can be done in a week. Okay. So students are about people. So theme your ideas or require reactions. Okay. You want to avoid like things like professors and bus drivers and people like that don't usually talk, or professors do, but it's a tough time because a lot of them might be away. It's summertime, that sort of thing. So try or pretty close to it. So try to think of like maybe something that students could do. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, well, I'm not around students either. I'm in home. I'm summer or summer class, that sort of thing. Well, actually, this is also another class participation opportunity, and that's where I put up a discussion point in the discussion section. As you can see right here, there's none yet, but what I'll do is I'll let you know that there's actually a discussion point. That's where I again ask you to not, to take off your reporter hat for briefly and actually put on your source hat. Serve as a person who can actually like provide some sort of opinion. I mean, I can't give away any ideas at this point, but basically provide some sort of an opinion on like whatever subject we're going to come up with, and you're going to put it, you can put it, I'll say like, I'll say in a discussion point, what do you think of such and such? And can you provide an example or can you provide an anecdote or something like that? And what you should do is you should actually respond to that, okay? And provide like some sort of an anecdote can help that people can look at and help build their story, okay? And I'll be looking for people to be participating in that as part of class participation, the 30% of your overall grade, okay? Also, another thing is, so there's another class participation thing, and it is actually like providing the ideas, okay? Because when I go to the grade section, I actually check off who provided ideas and who didn't. If you don't provide ideas, that's going to also be a knock on your class participation grade. I don't give an A or a B or a C or anything like that, a letter grade on fulfilling the requirements for this, providing ideas, but I do give a check or an X, okay? A check for those who have submitted, an X for those who didn't. And those who didn't will definitely will, those who don't provide ideas will definitely will impact your class participation grade, okay? So please submit the ideas, and then once we have the idea and I post a discussion point, please provide information for the discussion point, okay? Now, by the way, if we do pick an idea, and again, I can't give away ideas right now, but I mean, if we pick an idea on Friday, which we will, anyway, I'm sorry, I got a little mixed up for a second here. Um, Oh, So like I said, I'll post a discussion point and ask people to react to that discussion point. Okay. So, but you don't have to use people from that discussion point. If you feel like it's easier to interview somebody about a Rutgers subject or something like that, interviewing your roommate or something like that. Maybe you're living on campus in the summer. Maybe there's people you stay in touch with, on FaceTime or whatever, or maybe email or text or whatever, then maybe, then talk to those people. Maybe people you feel more comfortable with. You could talk to those people, a friend or something like that, people you see over the summer, that's fine too, okay? But the discussion point is just an option for people to like use for, to actually get information for a story. But it's really not an option to participate in it, okay? That's really, again, class participation, okay? So what do we have due? Okay, so again, the profile assignment was due on Friday, okay? Again, if you didn't submit it, you got an F. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, but let's stay in touch, stay organized, okay? Okay, so then we have the first assignment summer. The again, that's the rewrite option. I'm sorry, rewrite. That's the rewrite entry. It's not an option for people who get an R. And I was actually really pleased. There were only 6 R's out of 15, so that's good. Okay. Um, so anyway, that's um, that's where you submit your rewrite. Okay, and that's due on Friday. And then the leads worksheets. Okay, again, that's just 12, writing 12 leads on a Microsoft Word doc. You submit it to this entry right here. That's also due on Friday, and there'll be a rewrite option on that too. You'll have a we. I'll grade it over the weekend and provide it back to you. I'll grade it just the same way would a full story. I'll be looking for accuracy, clarity, and focus, that sort of thing. And when you actually like submit it to me, I'll grade it, and then you'll get the same thing, A through C. And then an R, means you'll have to rewrite it, but then if a C or above means you have the option to rewrite it. And then that's June 6th, and of course June 5th will be the ideas for the next assignment. Okay, yeah, that's right. So that's where you submit that. Okay. Um. All right. So let's go to So I've already like worked on essentially the post for this lecture, and I want to go over and I want to talk about also about like some of the stuff I found in the papers over the weekend. Um. All right, so let's see here. Assignments. I'm in assignments. Duh. Um, that's funny. Okay. Actually, I have to actually for this one I haven't actually posted yet because it's a Sunday. So I'll just read it out loud. Okay. Um, yeah, I'll see new lectures, one under the assignment. Other parts I write it a little differently, but okay. So everybody should have their edited graded assignment. Again, everybody can rewrite it. Some will have to rewrite if you don't get it. If you get an R. But I strongly encourage those who have got lower than A to rewrite by June 6th. Okay, if you get there's a couple B pluses here, which is great. I also had one A, which is great. That's a great way to start. Because I mean, again, we're starting with ground zero here, and I have to actually like turn this around in 4 days, as opposed to my in-person classes where they usually have like a week and a half to do that, or a week and a half really. That's something. Okay, so that's where you have that option. Submit it to the separate assignment entry. Okay, again, this is a new assignment for extra credit, okay? And it's to come up with 5 ideas. I talked about that. I'm gonna talk about this in a bit. There are new reading assignments, okay? And they're right here. I should say new, they're already posted, but chapter 7, 9, and 10 are there. Chapter 9 is the one that really deals with essentially, we're getting more specific about how a story should be structured. And that's actually something that's called the inverted pyramid, and I'll be talking about that in a bit. Um, and of course, don't forget about the second assignment. It's due Friday as the worksheets. Okay. A few things I saw, and I talked about this. Now, I don't usually like come out and talk to you about attribution right away. What I do is I actually kind of slip it into the editing of your first assignment. Attribution is the way of footnoting the source material for a news story. The whole idea is that a news story is supposed to be kind of more casual than your formal essay. Okay. So instead of having this thing that says like at the bottom of the page, cited blah work from blah 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 or whatever. It's just you just source your material by saying he said, she said, they said, or the person's last name said, or if it's the first time you're mentioning them, it's the full name. Okay. There was one student actually was like grateful or was nice enough to actually allow the his or her paper to be submitted as something I can use. This actually was a B paper, okay, because it was actually focused. It had like some good reporting in it, but I felt like it didn't have enough reporting in it. Okay. So what I did was, and I've said this a lot, I put this in your papers. Say Muhammad takes pride in helping rehabilitate injured patients. Okay. See, it's spelled wrong here. Um, okay. Um, I put it in instead of actually like really kind of teaching about like head on, like he said, I try to really like get you to learn by doing. So what I do is I kind of slip in usually the first edit of the first story attribution. And this is an example of like where we need attribution. We can't just actually like write things without some sort of footnoting or sourcing. Only this is more casual writing. So when people actually talk and they cite what people say and that sort of thing, and they do this in casual conversation, they usually say he said, or she said, or they said. They don't say, according to paragraph B of blah, 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 okay, down the bottom with a line over it. They just say he said, she said, they said, or the last name and said, okay? So that's attribution. Let's talk about that a little bit. Yeah, remember this? So what is attribution? Attribution, and it's actually something that is covered in the book, okay, is the way of footnoting source information in a story. And like I said, it's usually he said, she said, or they said. It often can come at the top of the sentence, maybe the middle of the sentence, or or last name said, okay, or at the end of the sentence, okay. And what it does is because what you're doing is you're, as I said before, I mean, you're like for this next assignment, you're probably gonna be interviewing this third assignment I'm talking about. You're gonna be interviewing students or whatever, or, using the stuff from discussion point. You're gonna need to basically let people know that this is actually coming from some place. Okay, attribution helps build credibility for a news story. It shows that when you there's also something called anonymous sourcing. Okay, a couple of you did something like that in your papers. I was like, no, okay. Anonymous sourcing is when they say like a source said or something like that. A lot of people don't trust that. Okay. That's something that's done for like major investigative work and stuff like that. But it's not really like the best thing to do for like a common everyday story, or you want to get the person's full name. Okay. And that's actually one thing I wanted to talk about too, is that that's actually Associated Press style. It's part of the Associated Press style book is how do you identify people in a story? And what you do is you typically what you do is not typically, but what you do is the first time you mention the person in the story, you should mention them in their full name. Okay. And then the next time you mention them, it should be like a pronoun, like he, she, or it's they, or it should be the last name. Not the first name, not the full name, okay, but just the last name. Okay. So it'd be you say Tom Davis is a lecturer. I'll say that's the story, okay? At Rutgers. Okay. So then the next, I mean, that's not the most interesting story in the world, but let's just say it was, okay? So then the next time you talk about him, you say like he likes the job, okay? Well, I mean, how do you know? Well, he said so. Okay, that's the first question people say. Well, how do you know? You just can't assume or guess. You know what happens when you assume? Make an ass out of you and me. Get it? Okay. You could assume wrong. Maybe he doesn't like the job. Okay. Maybe the next day he does something terrible, and he shows that like actually what he was doing was lying. Okay. Or another thing you could do if you do when I say your last name on second reference, you would say Davis said. Okay. Now, the ports of attribution again, what you do is when you attribute information, okay, when something is not obvious or not easily proven. Okay. Obviously, you can't get inside my head, so you know whether I like the job or not. I do. But anyway, you can't get inside my head, so you don't know whether I like it or not. So, all right. Another one is when the facts can be disputed. Okay. Okay. Um, all right. So, and the facts basically, or even be like, and what I mean basically is essentially this. Okay. So, Donald Trump is president. Okay, so that is actually factual. It can't be disputed. He is president. No one on earth will dispute that. Okay, I know. I realize that there's a lot of people out there who say he's not my president. Well, it's different. Okay, that's just a commentary. He is actually president. Okay. Joe Biden was president. That's also a factual statement. Since it's universally known, okay, and it can't be disputed, it doesn't need attribution. Okay. Donald Trump is a bad president. Well, basically, right now, that again, I mean, I know a lot of people can say a lot about stuff about this, but this is something that can be disputed. Okay. So, what it needs is attribution. Okay. So, suddenly, these two things actually become factual statements. And why? Because the factual part of this statement is this part: Donald Trump is president. Okay. The factual part of this sentence is this part: he said. If you're interviewing somebody and they say something and they say this, okay, then the actual, factual element of the sentence is this, the attribution, because it's something they definitely said. Maybe you even got it on a recorder or something like that. You got something that the person on the mic, okay, and you can even prove it and show them like he said it. So. Like if you had somebody like maybe like a Democrat say that or something like that, like Bill Clinton said, if you had him say something like Bill Clinton said Donald Trump is a good president, okay, you'd be like, what? Then you could, but basically, you go, what Democrat says that? So then, you basically, but then you show them the tape and you're something like that, and you say, look, he said it. So that factual statement becomes actually like the actual action of actually verbalizing that statement, okay? So that's why you do the attribution is to show like that this is actually something that happened and it came out of somebody's mouth, and that's the factual part of the component of the statement. Okay. All right. So that's attribution. So that basically got slipped in here. Okay. Um, so, but let's go back to this actually. What else we need to know? Okay. It's important to stay focused on the same topic from top to bottom. I had a few people who kind of like would start off with a good topic or something like that, but paragraph three, you veer off into something differently. Another thing I also saw a lot was this, where actually maybe I should use the this again, where it would be Joe Davis, let's say, um, is an investment financial advisor. Okay. And that's great. And then maybe they're a very successful one, that sort of thing. But then I would say Davis graduated Rutgers. I'd see something that happened like a long time ago in 1989. News is the portal of news. So what I want to know is like what happened between 2025 and 1989. Okay. I realize that sometimes that can be a little difficult because maybe it's like Joe Davis was in a car accident or something that changed his life. But what I want to know is okay, so maybe that is your first sentence, but the next sentence should be something like, but that incident turned Davis's life around or something like that. Like what is Davis still around? Is Davis doing whatever he can do to rehabilitate? What does this mean for Davis? Okay. When a long time ago there was an actor by the name of Christopher Reeve who got paralyzed in an equestrian accident, and he lived for another 10 years. But 10 years by that is 10 years. He had done a lot to actually like improve things like stem cell research and things like that, and get involved in the development of that, and like petition Congress to like make advancements in medicine, so maybe you could help him and others like himself walk again. stuff. So you would be writing, if you were writing a story about Christopher Reeve, I think he died in 2004, writing a story about before he died, you write about the Christopher Reeve who didn't get in the accident, but the Christopher Reeve who did so much after that to make everybody's lives, including his own, better. Okay. So Joe Davis is an investment officer. So what's usually the first question you would ask after that? Well, what does he do? And maybe like, how does he do it? How does he balance work-life balance, something like that? That's probably usually the first things. A lot of people wrote about like people who do stuff, and that's great, But I want to know, what does he do? I mean, and then you would have, then you would maybe, some people would actually bury that at the bottom of the paper, like what they actually did, and actually like some interesting stuff came out. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what they meant with the president of China? I mean, okay, so yeah, the second paragraph was they graduated Rutgers in 1989, but is that more important than they met the president of China this year? No, because there's two things there. First of all, meeting the president of China is way more interesting than actually graduating from Rutgers. And the second thing is it happened this year. Okay. So that's the newest, biggest thing, as I like to say. So you want to get that up at the top. You want to move that stuff up at the top. Okay. And that's part of the inverted pyramid style, where essentially it's a triangle. Okay. This is essentially an upside down triangle where the fat part I'll be showing you this in the book, but the fat part of the triangle um, is actually like the most important stuff. Okay, and then the pointy part of the triangle is at the bottom, and that's where the least important stuff goes. Usually background stuff that happened a while ago, stuff that leads up to what's going on now, what led to this thing to happen, or what led to this person to be doing this unique thing. Okay. Um, okay. So anyway, I would see that, but I would also so stay focused. But also, I would see something along the lines of this. Um, Joe Davis is an investment advisor. And then maybe like, you know, he he works in New York, sorry, in New York City, and uh, helps with. Oh my God. Okay. No, I'm not having a stroke. And helps with planning. People's investments. Okay, so maybe be a little bit on track, but then like suddenly like I see something like this in the third paragraph. Davis is a New York Knicks fan, and he's very excited. Well, they just got eliminated from the playoffs. He was very excited about their latest playoff run. Okay, so you're trying to like basically like give me information about the person and you want to let me know about all this different stuff that's going on about them, but that's not what a news story is. A news story is linear and it's focused. And talking about the New York Knicks has nothing to do with like being a financial advisor or this sort of thing. I want you guys to stay focused and give me like all the dirt on what he does and like how he does it and that sort of thing and stay focused from top to bottom. And if the New York Knicks have anything to do with that, then fine, write about it. But basically, you need to identify what this person does first. And then maybe like, how would there be a Knicks connection? The only thing I could really think of is if maybe he owns a stake in the team or maybe he like it helped him because he's become a successful financial advisor. It helped him buy those very expensive season tickets that are cost like 30,000 or 300,000 or whatever it is every year or so. It'd be a Timothy Chalamet. So all right. So yeah, you need to stay focused from top to bottom. I also saw like paragraphs are just way too long. Paragraphs that you just saw is the ones I was writing. Usually they're no more than a sentence or two, okay? And the lead is usually no more than a sentence, okay? So I saw like some very long paragraphs. I saw some at the very top. You don't want a news story. I know we use a textbook, but you don't want a story that actually like resembles a textbook, okay? This is supposed to be kind of like light reading, okay? It's supposed to be kind of easy reading where you move from graph to graph and, you just, you just you know, make it simple. Keep it simple, and basically like make it light on the eyes. You don't have to like, if you read a long paragraph, it comes across as like a ramble. Okay. You want to give people like breaks in between sentences and paragraphs and that sort of thing where they can take a breath. They can even make a decision whether they want to leave the story or not. Okay. Keep your lead simple and direct with a sharpened focus so that it's new and unique. Okay. Also, a couple people provide PDFs, AP style. Okay, I already talked about that already, but anyway, full names on first reference, last name on second and later. No PDFs, please. I use Microsoft Word. I'm sorry, it's really like all I can use. It's essentially the trademark way of doing it, and I actually can use track changes, which mine come out now and with this computer I just got in blue. Um, so you make sure you can see that. Um, and of course, I also have this in here. I actually probably don't, since I have almost everybody, I probably don't need a line in there that says like, please like email me because I think we've already covered that over and over again. I say six. Yeah, I haven't really updated this note on. Sorry about that. Okay. Just want to make sure that we got this. Hold on, hold on. All right. I haven't posted this yet. Okay. So, all right, I just want to make sure that you don't get a notice. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so, um, again, Microsoft Word docs, no to PDFs. Here's another thing I saw. Some people basically kind of inserted themselves in the story, okay? Where I saw like he told me or something like that, or so and so is my best friend, so and so is my sister. Okay, you're not inserting yourself in the story, even though you're interviewing like maybe like family members or friends. The best way we're writing news stories, and news stories are objective, and you're supposed to kind of remove yourself from the news story and basically be a fly on the wall. Okay, so even if it's a family member or something like that, please don't insert yourself in the story. And by the way, that's another thing with the attribution. It's really just best to just kind of say he said, they said, she said, the name said. Some people say something like so and so said under a cloudy sky, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's maybe something you would do in like a magazine or something like that, where you're trying to establish setting and all this stuff. Just he said is just actually kind of like the universal, no opinion attached to it way of attributing to a source. So just really stick with that, okay? Again, I also, by the way, offer office hours for people who are confused, don't know what's going on, and maybe you want to like talk. And I do that actually this same way. I do it through Zoom. So, let me know if you want to talk, that sort of thing, okay? All right. So let's go to the book a little bit again. Again, I asked you guys to read. Um, just a second, make sure I covered all my bases here. Okay. All right. So chapters 7, 9, and 10. What I want to do is actually like let's just kind of like maybe like go through this a little bit here, but especially with chapter 9, because I talked a little bit about the inverted pyramid. Okay. Okay, what do we got here? What is this? Okay, 7, 9. I said what did I say? 7, 9, and I'm sorry, 7, 9, and no, no, no. All right, hold on. Okay. I'm sorry, 7, 9, and 10. Okay. All right. So what I've asked you guys to look at essentially is like we have basic news leads, okay? And basically this is just a chapter, even though I've talked a bit about new leads already, this is a chapter again, the supplement, what I've already talked about. A story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, has to begin somewhere. The opening of the story needs to grab people's attention and hold it. The rest has to flow logically to its conclusion. The easiest thing for anyone to do is to stop reading or watching and listening. So you need something to basically kind of hook people in. And it doesn't have to be anything kind of fancy. You can just basically be something that actually like, just basically like has good substance to it, okay? And it gives you like this tree where there's actually always like a central point to a story, but then there's like ways that kind of breaks out into like different things like audio and links and different photographs and different an actual part of the story and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely the lead is what essentially starts everything, is what that's saying. Is a lead is actually it calls it a summary news lead. It's actually almost always a summary. Okay, it sums up what the most important story part of the story is. It says here, and is the hardest part to write. It's true. There are people who actually write stories in it first and then will write the lead after because they feel like they have to almost like kind of sort things out first, and then actually come up with the, major unique point. Okay. After that. But it's really, I think, the best way to do is actually just actually have the lead first and build on the lead after that and provide the information to help support the lead. Okay. Answering those who, what, why, where, when questions. Okay. Um, all right. And then it gives you like basically like the who, like you got each of the following leads answer the basic questions. That's what they typically do is the answers those who, what, why, what questions. Volomir's, I think his name is Zelensky, said early Sunday that the siege, the port city of Mariupol would go down in history. Or what he said was were war crimes committed by Russian troops, or 10 people were killed in a mass shooting, that sort of thing. And terrible some stuff. Texas has added 36 more deaths. This is actually more breaking news stuff than anything else. Okay. What's the sentence structure in a lead? Now, I already talked to you about that a bit and distinguishing it between a headline and a lead. And remember that the headline is typically not a full sentence. Okay. It says here, impeached once again. This is again a bit dated, but that's basically what you're doing again with the headlines. You're removing the thes and the uhs and the ands and that sort of thing. And what you're doing is just using like the very basic stuff, and what they call headlinees. And it's usually written in present tense. But the lead is actually the full sentence. Okay, so then that's when you have President Trump was impeached by the U.S. House for a historic second time Wednesday, charged with incitement of insurrection over a deadly mob siege. So yeah, I mean, I'd probably use the most extreme example of what a lead could be, but yeah, that's the lead. It's a full sentence. Okay. Um. Yep. And yeah, go ahead. Where are you going? Okay. Is Lilo coming or? Yeah. Okay. Oh, shoot. Oh, okay. Sorry about not coming in.
Is that paused?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, it's fine.
So maybe we can try the Xanax. Anyways. Good Poachy Poo. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep. It's trial and error on photography, by the way, Anna. Okay, so then that's essentially the full sentence right there is that it's a noun and a verb. President Trump was impeached by the House for a historic second time Wednesday, charged with incitement of insurrection. Full sentence, okay? That doesn't mean you can't go through any kind of like editing to cut down the words in a lead because you don't want it to be too long either. And see, like some people like to get into like these like introductory clauses and stuff like that. Just get right to the story. A special three-judge panel upheld major portions of a sweeping new federal parts of the laws involving whatever, so federal campaign contributions. Okay, that's the lead. That's the story. Okay. Again, some of the stuff we've already gone over already. Be concise, obviously, that sort of thing. Now, beginning with attribution, I mean, you could have attribution in the lead too. Like a lot of times people announce things, or it's just about something that somebody said, or it's about like if you do like a reaction story or something like that, you basically would say something along the lines of reacting to like let's say a Rutgers item or piece of information. Like many students or some students say they feel like this way about whatever subject you guys are going to be picking. Okay, so that's essentially attribution, giving it credibility. Okay, they have different types. Like there's a label lead, but that's basically like kind of like a boring lead, where basically like you just say like, you know, it's raining out today, and you're not saying much else. You're not showing like the impact. Like it rained, or the rain fell on Metuchen, New Jersey on Friday and caused a lot of traffic and even some flooding. You want to actually like add some like substance information that helps make it unique. Okay. Let's talk about this first before we get to chapter 9. That's actually quotes and attribution. So yeah, basically, as I've said before, I'm actually big into making sure that you write on your own and not rely too heavily on what they call direct quotes. Direct quotes, again, are essentially like anything that comes in between two sentences, okay? And actually, I forgot to mention, I was actually going to show you something, actually, a story that actually, like, um, but I guess I can do that when I show you the inverted pyramid. But I was going to show you a story that I felt like worked largely, okay? And I did show you a little bit of it so far, but I wanted to show you more. Anyway, um, all right. So anyway, just try to call this up. So direct quotes are essentially this. Um, okay, I know it's a little cynical. Causes epic. No, it causes a lot of causes about making this nice, and causes a lot causes the ground to feel moist and prevent drought. So this is a direct quote. Now, one thing about this quote, okay, is that it's not a very good quote, okay? You have to distinguish between what's a good direct quote and what's not, okay? And essentially, this is kind of more informational. A direct quote is only used when it's actually like when somebody says something colorful or somebody says something that's emotional or something like that. A lot of people like tend to rely on this way too much. They'll basically like have whole stories where it's just quoted material, maybe almost to play it on the safe side. What you should be doing is like taking this stuff and using your own words. And because actually, when you use your own words, you can write it better than the way they say it typically. Okay. If it's informational like this, and you can use fewer words. He said he likes rain because it makes the ground soft. Um, he also worries. This is actually probably around the same word length, but it's actually better worded, don't you think? I like it when it rains because it and causes the ground to feel moist and prevent drought. Maybe if you say something like that, that can prevent or that can cause the crops to dry up and hurt business around here, blah blah blah. He said he said he likes rain because it makes the ground soft. He always worries about drought that could be dangerous or something. Okay. See, take like that rambling sentence right there and you turn it into two sentences that are like more direct and more to the point and fewer words. Okay. He said he likes rain because it makes the ground soft. Instead of using the word moistens. Okay. He also worries about drought that could be dangerous or could, have an adverse impact or something like that. Okay. So you really want to try to get out of the habit of trying to rely too much on like long direct quotes, that sort of thing. You want to actually like be more of a paraphraser. And I like to say, again, like that you're actually like being a storyteller. When you just like actually use direct quotes all the time, that's actually just being what I call a stenographer. And you might see them, the people in court who go like this and type what's being said. A lot, actually, that's starting to fade out now, but what they do is they actually type down everything that's being said during the court hearing or whatever. Um, I always liken it to the person who I had a fellow freshman student when I was at Rutgers. Her name was Francine, and she wrote down. She was in psychology and with us, and she used to write down every single thing that was said. And I've talked about this a little bit already, but that's not really no way to learn. Okay, maybe you read the notes later, and maybe you get some idea later, but you got to really listen and understand. Like I said, remember what I said before. Um, and that is essentially like listen, internalize, write, summarize. It's better to really kind of get a better understanding of what's being said first. So you want to basically explain things and basically like a paraphrase in a news story as well, and explain to people like what's going on. And then maybe like when you have a direct quote, you make that colorful, okay, that sort of thing. And then that does help humanize the story when you have a direct quote. But what I was saying with Francine was that she wrote every single thing down And what we did was, and I hate to admit this, is that sometimes we used to miss the class. Sorry. I was on Targum, my lame excuse, and I used to miss class sometimes, that sort of thing. So we would actually read her notes. And would you know that we got a higher grade than she did? Because she wrote down everything that was being said and she didn't like comprehend what was going on, the rote learning, So that I mean that's essentially what this chapter is about. Indirect quotes is also like another way of paraphrasing. So you want to actually really like largely paraphrase about what's being said, okay? That's essentially like good news writing is good paraphrasing, okay? Um, we talked about attribution, okay? All right, now the big chapter, and that is chapter 9, okay? The body of a news story. Okay, the portion of the news story that follows. I know it's body. It's an essay term, but that's essentially what a news story is. Essentially, the whole thing is it's like there's a lead and a body, and that's pretty much it. There's no hypothesis. There's no topic statement. Nothing like that. It's just pretty much the lead and the body, and that's it. Okay. The portion of a news story that follows the lead is called the body that contains the information a reporter believes the public needs to know. That's essentially the fulfilling the who, what, where, how, why, when questions and answers. Okay. Inverted pyramid, hourglass, but don't worry about the hourglass. But we're going to talk about the inverted pyramid because I've talked about that a little bit already. And think of a news story as something that's driving along a track. The story that the rails in the story is the central point and give the story direction. It follows essentially one line. Or as I like to say is, you can see it basically. This is my extension cord. Steve Miller, who's a professor at Rutgers, likes to call this the string theory, and that is like you got one of these. If you ever had one of these Apple cords, you ever noticed that they get like tangled up easily, and they kind of like when you drop them and that sort of thing, and sometimes they're hard to unwind. Well, that's what happens when you have a news story that actually gets tangled and goes in all different directions and doesn't stay on its central point. What you want is a news story that actually stays straight from top to bottom, because if you don't, it gets all tangled and it gets the reader tangled. Okay. Um, but in order to do that, you really need to like again focus first on what's the most important thing in a news story. And here it is, everybody. An inverted pyramid in its full display and plunder. Um, so let's like try to maybe get this a little bigger. There we go. Whoa, not too big. Okay. All right. So okay, so I guess that's not gonna work out too well. All right, let me go back to what I had, if I can. Okay, I saw that. Oh, this is funny. This is funny. Okay, hold on. Ugh. Okay. And I'll click outside of it, right? Okay. All right, hold on. Oh, there's the close. Okay, there we go. All right, let's go back to here. Okay, so basically what you have is with inverted pyramid, you have the fat part. That's basically like essentially what it says here, the lead that summarizes the story. Okay. That's the most important part of the story is the lead, okay? And then, I mean, this is actually about a car crash, which is, one of the first things you want to learn about a car crash once you identify an lead, and that is you usually want to know if like people are hurt, I would say, or killed even, that sort of thing. I think people have compassion. I think that's people are not. I mean, I try not to be cynical here. I think people actually really care, especially if it's like children or something like that, or people with like long lives ahead of them. They really care about that. So that's usually the first thing that's identified in a story. But so you might like mention it in the lead, but then go in a little more detail in the second paragraph. So then you're moving down, and once you get into more specific detail like this, you move down, and then actually the triangle gets skinnier. Okay. And then like maybe the next thing you want to know about is essentially is like how it actually happened. And people of course always want to cast a villain. So there's that too. So you maybe that's the third bit. You see how it's getting skinnier. I mean it's going down, the elements are getting less important and less important, okay? From the first one, which essentially was anybody killed, okay? Then was anybody charged perhaps? Basically like quotes from the police officers. Quotes are not as important as like the information of a news story. The actual damage to cars is usually not as obviously not nearly as important, I would say, as like actually like somebody who gets hurt. I would say like somewhere in here also is maybe like traffic, causing of traffic or something like that. Actually, like for a lot of people, is actually probably the most important thing. but maybe you maybe make a mention of that in the lead, perhaps, but it wouldn't override like people being killed. Okay. But that would I would say is like another thing. So you basically have to kind of almost make points of the story, or maybe even make an outline. What do you think is like the most important part of the story and to the least important part of the story? And that's basically essentially your inverted pyramid, and that's essentially how you should essentially order the story. Not chronological order or anything like that, but like what's the newest, biggest thing, and then like flow from that background. Like I said, going back to like so who's so and so studied in what so and so studied in college, or something like that a long time ago. Background's usually at the bottom because it's stuff that happened a long time ago. Avoid this hourglass style crap. That's actually like something that's and focus style. It's all focused. Narrative style, we'll be talking about that like later in the semester. Okay. That's like actually like feature writing and stuff like that. Transitions. Transitions are actually like almost what I call like mini leads. Okay. We'll be getting more into that later in the week, I would say, because it actually like deals with how do you get through the story and guide the reader through the story. Okay. So you have a lead that essentially, basically like identifies what's going on. Okay. Rutgers students. I'm saying this because there's absolutely no way this would be a story idea that I would pick. Rutgers students say they like pens. Okay. So you would try to like divide the story and probably show them different ways and like why they would like pens. Some students, it helps guide the reader through the story. Some students say they like pens because they're darker, they have ink, unlike pencils. Okay. So basically, a transition is something that basically kind of takes the lead and breaks it down into smaller parts. Okay. But that's something that's actually probably best for like later in the week when we actually like talk about like our next assignment, which is going to deal with transitions and stuff like that. Okay. All right. Some of this we've already like talked about already. Points of example, points of description. Obviously, like need to be fair. Obviously, it's important to like be fair, to like try to like basically get both sides of the story, that sort of thing. I know there's a lot of argument about both siderisms, as I think that was what they call it, and that is basically when they try to like you have a story like when Trump and his people like got involved in that whole Charlottesville thing a few years back, and they tried, and he said basically like, "Oh, there are good people on both sides." And I know that's something that's been disputed about his intentions and what he said and everything, but the fact is that he did say it, and so maybe both sides, as they call it, can go a little too far. Okay, but it is try to get like a balanced opinions of both sides of the story. Okay, here's this again. Here's the story that I feel like that worked well, but like I said, maybe as some things that can help improve it. But again, but let's talk about it more specifically. Abdel Mohammed, a recent graduate from Rutgers University, has gained a reputation for his involvement within the world of physical therapy. So that's a good story because it's something that maybe like he's a recent graduate. That makes it unique. He's somebody who actually like, is has, basically um you know, a lot of people are actually having a hard time getting jobs when they leave the college. I hate to say, my son had a hard time too. So I mean, he's actually already like a couple steps ahead in his career, which is great. But what does he specifically do is usually like the first question when you do a story about a job. Okay. So he takes pride in rehabilitating injured patients. His expertise stretches, and of course, he said it should be added. His expertise stretches from the elderly all the way to young adults. Muhammad uses his vast knowledge acquired from his exercise science degree and diagnose and treat patients. That's good. So that's all about basically what he does and why, and then we get a little bit into like why he does it. But my only issue really here was essentially like maybe we should get more specific into what he does. Does he work long hours? Does is this something that you know? It's like maybe like is it hard to balance like personal and work life, but also maybe the specific stuff he does on like how does he help patients exactly? Who has he helped? That sort of thing. We want to like get a little more information on that. Okay. Beyond the scope of physical therapy, Mohammed plans to widen his area of expertise. That's more into like what stuff he's doing because he wants to use it to help people in general need. I also felt like it was important maybe to like make a connection to Rutgers and like maybe how Rutgers had actually helped him get there. Then it gets into the background where it says he traces his passion back to his father as a hematologist. Growing up, I always wanted to be like my father. And then um, it goes into a little bit about some of the side stuff he does, which is good for the bottom of the story. Maybe like I was saying before about the Knicks fan, like, well, how does it relate? Well, maybe that's like a way of actually that provides him some sort of you know, relief for what he does or something like that. Like, because maybe it's like a hard job and it causes a lot of stress and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So that's our lecture. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. And that's it. And like, make sure that you check out your graded papers, which came via email. And like I said, there'll be other stuff coming later in the week. Make sure you get your assignments in, the rewrite, and also the worksheets assignments on Friday. And then on Thursday, of course, the ideas for the next assignment. Thanks very much, everybody. I'll be talking to you.